okay, you're leading a traditional church. How would you kind of lead that, just a couple principles to this third way that you're talking about?
Oh, more of a traditional church, very slowly, by little baby steps. I mean, I think you have to be real careful not to, particularly if you're just taking over, to come in and make changes too fast. I think you have to go fairly slowly and gain trust. I mean, I think that's the case. But I think you begin to, one of the first things you do is just begin to teach differently. And teach in ways where you seed the ground before you make the change, and as you do that, then they begin to see I think they begin to see the need for it.
How would you distinguish between the great tradition and just orthodoxy, or is it the same thing?
Well, in the book, I use great tradition as synonymous with with classical orthodoxy. I mean, that's what Tom Oden calls it.
Gotcha. How do you see preaching changing? In light of this kind of, I don't want to call it anti-seeker, but this idea of that we've got unbelievers listening in, but we're not targeting them. We're still, we're not, hiding all the weird stuff or the stink stuff. How do you see preaching? How does that need to change? What would you give to instruct these guys as they're trying to do that?
I think that I think that one of the dangers, one of the things that we have to be careful with preaching is not the only teaching that goes on in a church. I think you guys all know that. There's other ways of discipling and getting out sound words. But I think what's changing in the last 30 years and been benefiting by lots of different things going on in the preaching community is that we're moving away from really straight-on didactic teaching where we're just speaking at people. And I think the best teachers now are, even when it's only a one-way conversation, they're making it a two-way conversation by being more Socratic, more rhetorical in their questions, more dialogical. And I think that's more conversational in a sense in how we teach, so that people feel like they're able to listen and enter in even if they can't say anything. Now, in smaller venues, you can actually have responses. And I think whether it's after the sermon or even during, our venue is not big enough that we can't do this, but there'll be occasions where people raise their hand right in the middle of the sermon and ask a question. And it helps us get on track. But sometimes you just have to watch faces. Are people understanding what's going on? So I think it is changing. But we've got more of a mixed group now because we're missional more than we've been in the past, and we've got to figure out a way to communicate to both groups.
And just a practical thing on how you can make a sermon feel more interactive. I'll do this a lot. I will try to speak the thought that I think they're having. So, Darren, are you saying that sex is only between a husband and a wife? Is that really what you're saying in this day and age? Is that really what? So you articulate the objection that you anticipate the objection, and then you articulate it. And if you talk to yourself, it's very disarming. Darren, really? Are you crazy? Do you really think that? Are you saying that?
That's good.
And so that is just a real way to bring people in and make them feel a part of the sermon.
Yeah.
Do you do offering at the end with your communion or in the middle?
We do it in the middle. It can be done at the end. The reason we've decided to do it in the middle is we present it to our folks as part of worship. That this isn't I always say this: our worship continues with a time of offering. This is a chance for you to think about what God has done in your life through the sermon right now, what He is doing. How can you offer your entire being to Him? And then I always tell people, to the guests, that you don't feel any compulsion to give. If you want to, you may, but this is for the attenders and the members of Redeemer to give back the first fruits of what God has so generously bestowed on them.
What are some tensions that you see between the grand tradition and being contextual? Are there any tensions there that you guys have encountered that you're seeing under contextualization, over contextualization? How do you move in that realm as a pastor, church planter?
Yeah, it's a great question because you're struggling with that. It's not all continuity from the past to the present. There is discontinuity. So how do you figure that out? We made a decision coming into Orange County that was very low church, a lot of Calvary Chapel experience. It's where the Jesus people were the strongest from the 70s. And so for an evangelical church to bring in liturgy, I mean, that may be going on at Catholic churches, but they weren't used to it. So we had to make a decision in order to contextualize the great tradition that we had to, I don't want to call it liturgy light. I mean, that sounds like it's a pejorative, but we definitely couldn't have really extensive, long set prayers. They had to be a little shorter in order to contextualize for people.
Okay, so this goes a little bit back to live. By the way, we have microphones up here. Oh, wait, I just got another one. How do you know if your guest, this is better than what I was going to ask. How do you know you're guest friendly? Often we think we're guest friendly. Give some principles to say.
That's easy. Just ask them. Have somebody who's brought them. Most of the time, guests are coming or being brought by someone. Just have your friend follow up and say, "What was your experience like? Did you feel comfortable?" Over the years, we've had people come, completely unchurched. They're married to a believing spouse, and the believing spouse just comes to our church. I mean, I didn't marry him that way. I didn't officiate that, but they'll come to Redeemer, and then the spouse will bring the husband, and they'll ask the husband. And I've heard over and over again that what the husband loves about it, kind of the deep church model, is that it actually engages them more on in an intelligent way and responds the way you do to their questions, even more than some of the secret churches.
What one other good thing on that, secret shoppers, you know what these people are? Corporations will hire them to go to their store, and they're there to kind of discern if things are being done right. Hire a secret shopper that's outside of your church to come in and help you evaluate whether or not you're friendly. That's a huge thing.
It's a great idea.
And if you're church planters, you can resource each other that way as well, because you can kind of come and go. How far is too far with regard to guest friendly? How far is too far?
I mean, I think it's too far when your guest comes and they don't hear the gospel. I mean, if they come and every time somewhere in your service, they're going to hear a very clear presentation of the gospel and the kingdom of grace, then you're doing good.
And I'll also make a pitch for weekly communion on that, because if you do weekly communion, sometimes the gospel, like the good news, bad news, 1 Corinthians 15, for sinners, the gospel for sinners, can feel like an add-on, a tack-on. But if you do communion every week,
it's beautiful.
It's a multimedia presentation of the gospel, and certainly, and it's so funny that we have taken all of our creativity to lights and video and musical instruments and all that. We've not taken our creativity to the Lord's Supper, and I think there's some room to do that. So I would just challenge your thinking.
Just a point on that. When for instance, our Maundy Thursdays, we do a Maundy Thursday service. It's on Thursday night, right before Easter. I think you probably got that. We decided we wanted to be creative in how we did it, because every week people are used to coming down. But we didn't think if we just served it in the pews, that was creative, because they do that. So we actually drew back from church history, and we said, I love how the Scottish Presbyterians do it, and they serve communion at tables. So on Maundy Thursday, we have tables set up all over the sanctuary, and when people come forward, they come to the table, they sit, and they pray, they linger, they spend some time there. Then when they're ready, they're served. And we expand the time, we double the time that people, and I have people every year who say that is the most profound service of the whole year. That's their favorite service.